So just to introduce myself, my name's Noah Harper. I'm a planner over with JM Goldson, and we've been working with the town on a housing production plan since September, October. So we're here in the home stretch of it right now, and in what we like to call the end of the community engagement phase. And the idea is to share publicly what we've been working on and have a few opportunities for community input. And since this is virtual, I'll have a few links and codes to scan, and then folks will be invited to fill out a brief survey and then also fill out some editable PDFs that we've uploaded to the town website that they can then email to me over the next week. The idea is to share the ideas for the goals and strategies that we've all been working on, get any comments on that, and then we're going to meet again next week to have a more regular working group or committee meeting to go over what we heard and revise it. And then the plan is going to get all parceled together from the pieces that we worked on over the past, 6, 7, 8 months now. So that's the general plan. I'm going to talk through some of the strategies and give some examples, and then at the very end we might have some silent time where I just leave up on the slides. Here's a link. Here's a QR code you can scan with your phone. Take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to at least go to the link and get on your computer so you can take a peek and send it over to us with your thoughts.
Hey, Noah, can you recap how things went last week?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say we didn't have a super big turnout. There were more folks, I think, on Zoom than in person, but we enjoyed getting to have just some more face-to-face conversation, which I think is always great when we're on Zoom all the time. Basically, how it worked is a lot of the slides I'm going to show today, we talked about and then set up a room in the senior center with basically the same slides, but printed out and had sticky notes and stickers and asked folks to circulate through. And at the very end, we had a report out session. So some of the people who attended stayed and had a good conversation about housing and all those sort of hot topic issues of transportation and density and talking about things. But yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm also glad we're doing another one of these too to make sure folks that weren't able to get there have another chance.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe if it's 12:04, I'm gonna be respectful of everyone's time. I'm gonna launch into the presentation, and yeah, I may need to request sharing from the town if that's all right with you all. Sam, is there anyone on your side that could give me sharing privilege?
I can do it here. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think what I didn't build into this, but if we do have a raise hand feature at the end, would love to take questions and comments from folks too. Just like we had at our in-person event last week. But I can talk a little bit before my slides go and
Okay, yeah, I have to get the host code because it's not set up on here.
No rush. I'll just give a little more background on myself. I'm a community planner. I work in housing plans and have done a little bit of work in a lot of different communities in our area. Like we've just finished up Worcester's housing plan, worked over in Danvers. They're in the home stretch as well, a month or two farther along than you guys. And Revere got wrapped up back in December. So I've had some really good, I think I'd say perspective on different size communities, different placed in the area, and also get to see housing costs and crises of affordability from all those different areas. And it's a similar story. No community is exactly the same, but there's a lot of folks that are struggling to be able to afford housing, to rent, to buy, and Wakefield is no different. I want to recognize our advisory committee folks that are in the room right now, just listening in, and excited to hear you guys' thoughts next week on any comments that we hear today and help that inform and shape the goals and strategies of the plan. Looks like I'm about to get to share my screen, but not quite yet. And also want to thank Sam Elliott for helping on the staff side, helping coordinate all this. Been working on it for a while, and she's been excellent. Just to recap on the schedule, we started things back in September as I share my screen, and we are here in April. So we're near the home stretch. And I'm going to get this up for you guys just to show you. We are targeting getting this plan done by the end of May. So this goals and strategies piece is perhaps the most important, and basically the big outstanding item. After that, we'll be reviewing a lot of the work that we did earlier, but this is putting on paper what are the things that Wakefield can do to address housing affordability in the town. and we're almost there. So the first thing I wanted to do was any folks that are just here joining us, pause here for just a minute or two and see if you have a chance to scan this QR code here on this slide. Go to this website, tinyurl.com/Wakefield Housing Survey. And all this is the same thing we asked folks last week, which is, do you live in the town? What's your connection to it? Do you own or rent? Are you experiencing housing instability? How long have you lived in Wakefield? What's your age? And are you serving on any town boards or committees? It's just a helpful tool to contextualize any information that we get to say, okay, this group was really well represented at our forum. Well, maybe some other groups weren't as well. But I will sit here for maybe just another minute. This is not super integral to the presentation or the activity, but if you'd like to fill out the survey, give us just 30 seconds of your time to share where you're coming from, what your background is. It'll be helpful for us as we summarize and unpack what we learned at this forum and next week, next Wednesday. So just give it 20 more seconds and then I'll cruise back. And then I would say at the very end, if you missed it, give us a hand raise and we can move back over to it. I think the big thing to talk about is why housing, why now? Why are we working on a housing production plan? And a big part of it, as revealed in our housing needs assessment that we worked on back in December and January, was the lack of stable housing that Wakefield's experiencing, like so many in Greater Boston. People having trouble putting down roots, particularly those who are a little bit younger, who we're not from the area, who weren't able to buy back when housing costs were not quite so out of control, and the ripple effects that has on the community. People building businesses, being a part of community life, just having someone that can put those roots down and you can really get to know them. That becomes harder and harder as housing costs sort of start pushing people away. They mean that you're moving maybe from town to town every couple of years because you're only renting instead of owning. And that means a less stable community, less strong civic engagement. And there's very real stressors too on your health if you're not sure if you're going to be able to afford shelter for yourself or your family. And as I mentioned with the small businesses, housing is economic development, both in terms of attracting employers who might want to locate in Wakefield and know that their employees are going to be able to afford to live there and remain rooted and they can rely on that. But also the economic development of the town's tax base. New growth, which is where you can get more tax revenue, is outside of the 2.5% limit on levies. That comes from new development, including housing. And so it's a big part of trying to be stable with your tax base as well. Is thinking, how can we get more money without having to raise taxes on folks? And that was a big theme that we heard in our community survey we had back in the fall, which is folks that do own their homes, high property taxes are a real burden. And then just a final thought on why housing, right? Why now? A more affordable and accessible Wakefield. We've heard a lot moving just from young families or professionals, from seniors too, who might own their homes but are having a little more than they can manage, and accessibility concerns on that. It's not unusual. We had the same response in the survey as in places like Danvers and actually Revere, where people are generally happy with their home, right? They want to stay in it, but they say, I'm not sure that my home's going to meet my needs due to accessibility concerns, due to staircases, or just having to go up the stairs to get in there, or maybe the bathroom doesn't allow for the turning radius on a wheelchair. So that was a sort of a thing I wanted to flag there, and it wasn't unusual, but it means people want to be in Wakefield. They want to stay where they are, where they have their community, but they're anticipating that their home might not meet those needs. So we're here to do some thoughtful planning and balance what we've been working on, what we hear from the community, and make sure that this is a community crafted plan with that vision for the next 5 years. Housing is increasingly unaffordable, as I mentioned. Spoke to one interviewee. We did a bunch of interviews for this plan as well. And they said they'd purchased their home in 1990 for about $190K. And I won't ask you guys to unmute and say anything, but if a home in 1990 went for $190K, the median home this year is now going for $855,500 in Wakefield, and that is very typical for Metro Boston. So it's happening all over, and it's a severe crunch. This is a graphic from last year, from 2024, so it's a little bit lower because they just keep going up. The median single-family home still in the 800,000 range. A condo still $500,000, and a median two-bedroom, which means if I can't afford to buy a home because of high costs, high interest rates, all that stuff, I'm stuck renting and shelling out $2,700 maybe for a bedroom, and that could mean you have roommates, or you're splitting something with someone else, or just putting way more of your income towards housing costs. And that can go back to people who even own their homes that are putting too much of their income on housing costs, like property taxes and repairs and heat and all those associated things. We sort of categorize folks when they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing as cost burdened. And cost burden is one way that we like to categorize and figure out, just from a sort of 10,000 feet up in the air, what the housing conditions in a town are. Another way is looking at what the official HUD figures are for low income in an area. And I'll just note, on April 1st, this figure was updated. And now the median family income, which is that sort of middle number, 50% of people make more than that, 50% of households make less than that. It's now about $160,000 for our region. So it keeps climbing up, which means some folks are making more money, but those that aren't, those are on fixed incomes or haven't been able to really realize that growth, are falling farther and farther behind, and would be classified as low income. So based on your family size, of course, but also there's different tiers. And when we talk about capital A affordable housing, which I call capital A because it's deed restricted, it's structured, it's formalized. They look at how much you might make. They look at that 30% figure as well to see if you're cost burdened, and set how much you should pay based on that. But we identified that there's a real need in Wakefield, and did some community engagement, spoke to folks at the Council on Aging, from the food pantry, from LEO, the Lynn Economic Opportunity Council, who provide heat assistance in Wakefield, and just kept hearing the same thing about folks having trouble making ends meet, seniors, families going without, and it's a real concern. Here's another quote, just wanted to pull out: not enough lower cost starter home options and options for seniors. There is a little bit of senior housing in Wakefield, but not a ton of dedicated, and also not a ton of affordable, that overlapping those two. Someone else in the sort of open-ended comments in the survey said, balancing affordability and increasing the number of units while not destroying older housing and neighborhood streetscapes. And that is a real sort of thing that we at J.M. Goldson love to harp on, which is, we call it gentle density. How do you build and sort of retain the character of a place? Add some more rooms for folks, make sure there's accessibility and affordability, but keep the things about a street, a neighborhood that give people pride and make them really feel like they belong there. And those are some of the ideas that have been percolating through the goals and strategies that I'll talk about in just one second. A housing plan is a state planning document under Chapter 40B, which you may or may not have heard of. And it's outlined the different pieces of it. There's the housing needs assessment, the data and the charts I mentioned a little bit that we worked on earlier in the project. We also look at zoning and environmental constraints in a chapter called development constraints, all about what are the things that would make building housing really difficult in Wakefield. And I want to call out that also talked about the current environment for interest rates, the high cost of building materials. There's so many different factors that contribute to high housing costs, and we've provided an overview in that chapter. Local capacity, so try to harp on those different groups, and both official sort of town-run organizations, but also nonprofits and other organizations in the area that can contribute to making housing more affordable in Wakefield. And then the thing that we're really focusing on today, which is goals and strategies, that I'm going to talk about in just one second. I just wanted to plug, if you are a nerd like me and want to think about housing and how to tackle things, the state has some really interesting documents that have just come out in the last last few months, actually. The Greater Boston Housing Report Card that's not put together by the state, but kind of puts the things we talk about in Wakefield in a broader context and try to weave that into the plan a little bit as well. And then the state's comprehensive housing plan and the Unlocking Housing Production Report. Those both came out in the last few months, and they're really interesting state level documents with a lot of ideas for how to tackle this big problem that is not just happening in this community. But anyway, I'm going to talk through some draft goals and strategies, and then we'll have an opportunity for input, both with the PDF version of all this that we have online, and then also ask you guys if you want to raise your hands to ask us some questions. We have a few goals to get through, and I want to just talk about a few key strategies with it. Goal number 1 is achieving and maintaining Wakefield's 10% status on the state's subsidized housing inventory. That's a list that the state keeps for every municipality in Massachusetts, and basically is saying what percentage of your year-round housing units are capital A affordable. There are some nuances there, and Wakefield is almost at 10%, which is that sort of state goal and requirement, almost there. And a housing production plan, what it does is it helps you out if you're not quite at 10%. And developer, say, wants to build a 40B development in a place that the housing plan didn't identify as being optimal for where we want to have growth, where the community came together in this planning process and said, let's build here, here, and here and have it like this. Well, if the town meets certain production targets and you're under 10%, the housing production plan gives you a little more wiggle room when you're going to the state, when you're with the zoning board of appeals denying their applications. And there's a lot of nuances there, but a housing production plan is both a way to have a little more control over development in the community with this 40B subsidized housing inventory process. But also, I like to think of it as a proactive document that the community says, here's how we want to really think about housing affordability beyond just those affordable units. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. Wanted to interweave some examples of other communities that we've worked with. We're also wrapping up Acton's housing production plan and update to it. And they have a few really cool examples of different town organizations coming together to build things. This is their affordable housing trust, which is called the Acton Community Housing Corporation. They really spearheaded this effort to build 31 units of accessible and affordable housing for seniors and people with disabilities. Tavernier Place, named after a local housing activist in the town. The design is really interesting and would welcome you to take a look at it. And I want to say that there's many examples like this in our region of municipalities that have been building affordable housing that can be contextual and meet those needs. Number 2 is promoting a range of housing options that meet the needs of extremely low, very low, low, and middle income households. Those are those different income levels that I showed in that chart a little bit earlier that had our median incomes. We also wanted to acknowledge that middle income households that might not qualify for affordable housing are still struggling. They might not be able to qualify to get capital A affordable housing, but are in desperate need or want to not be paying more of their income on rents to buy a home. We want to be thoughtful about creating options for them too. So one idea of many is to think about, are there any town-owned sites like the Herd School to do their own planning process, to work with, say, mass development on community engagement, on shaping a vision for what that could be. And that could be one way to promote a range of housing options in Wakefield. And here's just another example over in Newton that was a mix of different funding sources, federal funds, local funds. CPA are those local funds that Wakefield does not have, but also home and CDBG funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development from the federal level. And they were able to put money into rehabilitating some existing senior housing. And perhaps there are examples of existing affordable housing in Wakefield that could benefit from some time, love, and care from some rehabilitation. Another example of things that Wakefield could work on to help promote those housing options to help households that are struggling is down payment assistance. Medford uses its pot of federal funds to assist households, giving them a little more money to buy a home. And that's something certainly the town, perhaps through the Affordable Housing Trust, could explore to to see what that would look like here. Number 3, address the housing needs of residents with disabilities as well as seniors. And one idea here is taken from this real built example of a cottage court style development over in Concord. It's called Concord River Walk, designed by Union Studio, who does really cool design that I feel like honors the character of older, more historic New England development. The idea is there a middle ground between a single family home that might be too big for some households, and not quite leaning into townhomes or apartments, but something where you can have more of a communal feel. Folks still have their own space, but get to see each other. And maybe there are options to make that accessible, add affordable homes, and ensure that the folks can stay in Wakefield and retain some of the community, even if they're not in the exact same town. And being thoughtful, how do you put these in the parts of town that have access to groceries and other places for errands, for pharmacies, public transportation, and being thoughtful about that. Goal number 4, encouraging a balanced mix of housing types and scaled development in strategic locations, which I think harkens back to being thoughtful about where in town would be most ideal for some of that more gentle form of growth, where people can walk, don't have to always be hopping into their cars for every single errand, where there are already a lot of amenities. And one idea is looking at downtown. Are there any places in downtown, particularly near the train station, where there could be thoughtful housing production? And one example, this is a little wonky, it's very popular in the planning world right now, is thinking about, is there a special form of zoning the town could look at for areas around downtown that thinks about the form rather than purely uses, which is how existing zoning predominantly works. And so you can really hone in on what are the things about downtown Wakefield that give it character, that make you want to stay there and walk around and give you that community pride, and put that into some regulations and say, okay, if we do want to see some new development here, maybe mixed use, some more businesses on the ground floor and maybe some apartments up there, we want to make sure it looks a certain way, that it honors the existing context. And there's a lot of really great examples there. Somerville, for example, threw out their whole zoning code a few years ago and has just a form-based one now. And it goes into very granular detail to keep things looking in the way that the planning process determined. All right, we have just 2 more goals. Number 5 is building community understanding and support for housing solutions, which is almost something that we're doing right now, just having a conversation about housing, about affordability and potential strategies and solutions. And one is educating homeowners on how accessory dwelling units can provide more flexible living arrangements, maybe some extra rental income to help with property taxes or covering a mortgage. Or maybe as a couple are getting older, they can move out into an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard, and maybe their kids, if they have kids of their own, could be in that main dwelling. Just those ways to, in a gentle way, think about adding a few more units, a few more people, and educating about it. ADUs are now something that is legal across the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts and almost in all single family zones based on how every town and city sets up their zoning regulations. But just educating people on this new tool that's available, I think is going to be really key. And goal number 6, last one, this is a more strategic one, less about housing production itself and more thinking, how do we foster better coordination among town boards and partners to implement this plan and ensure that this plan doesn't expire when the 5-year time frame after it gets approved is over. One idea beyond just planning for making the next housing plan is setting up a housing roundtable. Concord does this. They just on a quarterly basis, so 4 times a year, get various housing focus groups to come together, give reports on progress. One thought was asking potentially the Affordable Housing Trust to be in charge of monitoring the implementation of this plan through something like that. And just one last example from Acton, a project they're working on right now to just talk about why that collaboration is really important. This is 41 affordable rental units built through their housing authority, but it has a lot of support from their Affordable Housing Trust, from the Community Preservation Committee, from the town itself in disposing of some land. So I think it is just I want to make it really, really highlight that it's so important to keep those conversation channels open to ensure that folks are aligned and thinking, hey, we can work together on this. You know, we can't do it on our own. Maybe there are ways that we can collaborate and get some real affordable housing that meets the needs of the town put together. So that's it on going through all the different goals and strategies. And I just wanted to talk about what we're doing, incorporating our feedback. This is a picture from our event last week, our breakout. Essentially, after we're done, after we do our Q&A and folks fill out and send me in your PDFs, I'm going to be reading through all the feedback and summarizing it so that we can talk about it next week at our committee meeting. And we're going to revise the draft goals and strategies that are listed. They're listed online and some of the ones that I just shared right now. The idea is to make sure that these reflect community goals and priorities, and maybe you all have ideas that didn't come to mind for us. That would be really helpful. In terms of next steps, we're going to be having a meeting. I'm tentatively the time and date. The goal is to get this whole thing all ironed out and ready to go to present to the town council in late May or at the latest very, very early June. So the housing plan can be sent to the state. They can stamp it and you have an approved one. And so I wanted to share that I calling it homework, and maybe I'll leave the next slide up after we open the floor for any hands raised, is to go through these worksheets that we've uploaded to the town website, fill in the PDF so you can click through it and write it and save it to your desktop, and share your thoughts. I only gave a few key strategies from the goals and strategies there, but there's a lot more, and would love as much feedback as you all have time to give. And you've got basically another week to email them over to me. I'm going to take this off so we can see if there's any questions or conversation. But after that, I'll put this right back up so you can scan it with your phone or go to this website and then email it over to me. But yeah, I'm going to unshare and then just see if there's any hands raised, any questions or comments. Looks like Beverly might have a hand. I'm not sure if I have, but ask to unmute if that's okay. Hey.
Hi, my name is Bev Elswich, and I work at the Galvin Middle School. And I've worked with, my concern is, it's great with all these 40B apartments, but unless some of these low-income families have vouchers, they can't afford it. I know of one of my families is in a shelter right now. They moved from Dedham to now they're in the 3-family shelter. They're waiting for their voucher. It's been a couple of years. This is not okay. You know, we need to look at it. I mean, I'm glad to see all the progress that you're making with the disabled and the elderly. But what about the families that have children? There's no place for them to go. I know personally there are landlords that realize that they can get the prices for their rent like Grayson is getting, and they're evicting people left and right. And these people are going into shelters. We're losing great kids in the school system because they can't afford to live in Wakefield without a voucher.
I think it's a really good point, Bev, and really, yeah, just appreciate you being
Yeah,
here.
I'm really concerned.
Theo, who's on our committee and isn't here, has been a great voice for just helping ensure that we keep families as part of it too, seniors and folks with disabilities. But young families are the future of every community, and I think that's just a great thought for us when we put our heads together next week to think how can we center them more in our strategies too. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. All right, I'm going to scan through to see if there are any other hand raised, and committee members, you guys are free to give a comment or a question too if anything comes to mind. All right, seeing none, I think I'm just going to ask our town planner if there are any comments or things to share. And then after that, I'm going to put the slides back up with that link. So anyone who wants to can scan it and go to the website and give if you'd like to do very detailed comments and go through one by one and share them with us, you'll have a chance. But Sam, anything you'd like to share?
I would echo with what you're saying with that. If you have the time, it's great if you could fill out the worksheet. It helps us get the public commentary back and helps us make sure that we're looking at this in a holistic fashion, not just from one or two angles. And it does take a little bit of time, but you can always email it directly back to me or to Noah. My name is Samantha Elliott. My information is on the town website, and you can include attachments that way as well. But no, I think you covered most of it. We appreciate everybody who's taken the time to be here and really value your feedback and comments and help to make the housing production plan really reflect as much of the needs as possible of the community.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I just want to echo with thank you folks who are tuning in today, and also thanks just to our committee members who have been putting in some hours over the last 6 to 8 months to help guide this, and we'll be putting in some more work in the next month and a half as we get this thing all finished up. But I think what I'll do is reshare the screen so my face will go in here and leave that up for 5-10 minutes in case anyone tunes in and wants to take a peek at it. But yeah, I'd say I'll just check one more time to see if there's any hands raised, any other comments or questions, and if not, you guys are free to go, and I might go on mute over here as we just scan. But I'll hang out here. Bob, looks like you got a question.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make a comment. So my term on the town council ends next Tuesday, which means I will not be at your meeting on Wednesday because my membership on this advisory committee is predicated on being a town council member. So Councilor Jonathan Chines has volunteered to take my place. So he will be sitting on the housing production plan advisory committee effective next week after the 22nd. Gail is the acting vice chair, so Gail is the vice chair, so she'll be the acting chair. See if she wants to do that. There's only a couple meetings left.
Go with it.
But a couple of quick things I wanted to mention. When you look at goal number, you don't have to go back to it, but goal number 1, with the housing production plan, getting this plan in place by this summer, and they're good for 5 years. The state approves them for 5 years. We will probably hit 10% this decade. But then when the new census comes out in 2030, a lot of municipalities find when the new census comes out, they fall below 10%. The good news of having this housing production plan from 2025 until the summer of 2030, if Wakefield finds itself in a position where they've fallen below 10% with the new census, they have time to look at the housing production plan and see about renewing it for an additional 5 years. You have to ask the state for renewal, and also has the possibility of getting it certified if our subsidized housing inventory numbers are such. And if you have a certified housing production plan and you're not at 10%, that's when you're allowed under the state law to say no to 40Bs that are not good for the town. The other quick thing is Noah alluded to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees being the ones to put together the quarterly meetings. We want to make sure that the housing production plan stays on the scope of town officials. The other thing I'd like to see in the final plan, if you are willing to do it, is I think that the HPP should be on the town council agenda twice a year. It should be on the town council agenda in January, and it should be on the town council agenda sometime in the summer, especially if it ends up getting approved by EOHLC this summer. And that way, the town council is looking at the recommendations in the housing production plan. For instance, the last plan we had recommended an affordable housing trust fund, but that wasn't done during the life of that HPP. But now we have an affordable housing trust fund that is providing renters assistance. And down the road, we'll be looking at there's not a lot of town-owned property, but town-owned property for affordable housing, as Noah alluded to, and also potentially first-time home buyers. Because right now we have about $1 million in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Because we're not a Community Preservation Act community, we don't have a funding source for that. So that's an issue that the Board of Trustees is going to have to look at in the future. The last thing I want to say is I want to publicly thank Sam Elliott, who has been on board as our town planner for about a year. But during that time, she has helped the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees with setting up the Renters Assistance Program. She helped get this town through the MBTA 40A required law, and I worked extensively with her throughout the entire summer as part of the town council subcommittee on that. And then her work here on the housing production plan. I have been incredibly impressed with her professionalism and her dedication to this town over the last year. And I just wanted to publicly say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. But one quick thing I do want to add is if you, as an alternative to the QR code that Noah is going to put up on the screen, the form is available under the Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee's page on the Town of Wakefield's page as the meeting materials. So if you go over to that section, I don't know if it's under this date or if it's under, I'm sorry, there's an echo, or if it's under the 4/9 date, but it's because we had two forums, so I'm not sure which date it is, but it's the most recent meeting materials, and you can find the form there as well.
No, that's a great thing to echo, Sam. Just it'll be available too after we stop sharing on Zoom if you'd like to take a look in the next week at all to review. But yeah, just want to thank you, Bob, for those comments. And I think my one note would be that we could add that to our draft goals and strategies. You know, ask the town council to review the plan on a biennial basis, something like that. So yeah, great ideas coming from this conversation. And I'm gonna go on mute over here and share the screen. I'll check one last time to see if there's any raised hands, but folks, feel free to email myself, email Sam if you have any questions. And to our working group, to our advisory committee members, looking forward to meeting with you guys next week and talking through what we heard today as well as last week. So I will share that screen and folks feel free to filter out if you've already taken a peek at the materials. And yeah, just want to say thank you all everyone for being here today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Noah.
Thank you.